Well, now here's that question I definitely can't ask you because it will absolutely involve your trade secret. So I want to ask you how you negotiate the contract, how you get that going. But let's take the two potential scenarios. We get a yes, you're excited about it, I'm excited about it, we're going for it, and nobody says yes. It's back to the drawing board. We're out of places to submit to. What happens in each of those? Where do we go next?
So sorry, what was the first scenario?
First one is we've got a publisher. You've masterfully negotiated a fantastic contract. I'm thrilled with it. You're thrilled with it. The publishers, that they wish they didn't have to pay so much money, but they didn't reckon with having to deal with Kristy, the incredible agent. So that once the book is sold and we're moving on, how involved are you in that process? And then let's circle back and say, what do we do if we don't sell the book?
Okay, so in the first scenario, from there, I'm still pretty involved. Like, I like to be copied on things. I get to see your publicity plans. We can discuss that, see, what you should maybe ask about, any sort of question. Especially, I work with a lot of debut authors. So a lot of things are just, is this normal? Is this normal? Should this be happening? And I'm happy to weigh in on that. And so it's kind of helpful for me to be copied because I can see what they're seeing and be like, yes, this is normal. Yes, that's fine. And then in terms of editorial, though, I definitely take a back seat because they're now working with the publisher house and the editor. So I am copied on that, but I don't usually weigh in unless there's any sort of issue. And I think that the relationship between the author and the editor is just as important as that of the author and the agent. So as much as possible, I don't want to be a middleman and be a barrier between that. And tend to step in more when maybe it's something that's easier that comes from me, that maybe is a more sensitive issue, or if there's a problem, then I'm right there having been copied to kind of jump in and be that advocate for my client.
What kind of generic issues, having absolutely no relation to any real life scenario with a client you've ever dealt with, but what types of things might come up where you'd feel the need to step in?
Oh, that's a good question. And trying to not name things that are like in my head are all the situations that have come up that are very specific, and I don't want to name those. But just disagreements, things that maybe editorial, but maybe title isn't working, maybe changes to the book that don't feel organic. Maybe their editor just isn't responding quickly and haven't gotten an answer on something we need an answer. I can kind of nudge. It can really be any number of things. But yeah, just there. Usually, publishing is great. Everyone is trying to make the best book possible. And as we said, are in it because they have a passion for it. So it's never like I'm coming in guns blazing, but I think sometimes having an outside person to kind of address an issue can take some of the emotion out of it. And that can kind of lead to a more productive conversation.
Gotcha. That makes sense. And then, okay, so you're staying out of it. You're looking at publicity. What else are you doing in preparation for launch? And what are we doing once we get there?
As an agent, I'm just looking at the plans with the publisher, making sure everything is going smoothly. Everything seems to be on time. My author's being looped in. My author's happy with the direction things are going. We start to think about the next project, how we want to approach that. Pretty much all those things. And it really just depends on the author and the project. But any number of things. I'm really there to be the author's guide through the process, especially debut authors who, like I said, everything is new. Just making sure they understand, every step. And if they have any questions, I'm there.
Okay, so now comes time for the next book, follow-up book, which hopefully I'm so responsible I've already half written. But assuming that's not the case, how involved do you like to be? Do you want to spitball ideas for what the book should be with me from that early stage? When do you want to get involved?
I usually get involved pretty early. I'm always happy to hear ideas. Even just like I always say, the hook, just the little pitch that you would, if the book sold, you'd put on Publishers Marketplace. If you want to just run that germ of an idea by me. So I'm kind of looped in every step of the way. From there, I really like to see a synopsis and maybe an outline. I think all my authors work in slightly different ways. I tend to have a more organized mind, so that works really well for me to see a synopsis, to see a chapter outline, to see a first initial pages. I have a few authors that are just complete pantsers, and they're like, I can't do that. I can't fit that mold. And so I kind of work more with their style of how they like to approach it. So it kind of just depends, but I'm always there to hear ideas and kind of see, where I think it could fit into the market.
And then let's say I'm working on it, and I'm not a pantser. I've sent you a full synopsis with an outline with a pitch, and I'm on, I don't know, page 100. And based on my synopsis that if I continue working within 2 to 3 months, I'll be at the full draft. When do you start talking about that book? If you happen to be chatting with an editor who mentions they want exactly that type of book, do you mention my book, or no, do you wait until it's actually finished?
Yeah, you can mention. So, a little bit, sometimes contracts will have option clauses to not get too specific. So a lot of times your book will be under option, and there's specific windows when that would be submitted. And, they usually have guidelines as to, they want the first 50 pages or the first 6 chapters. So that's a whole different beast, because if the publisher has the option, you have to submit the project to them first, obviously. But let's just say they don't. And let's just say, this is just a second project and we're not considering any other factors that we might consider. But yeah, if I'm meeting with an author or an editor for lunch and they say they want this, I'm always talking up my author's projects. I don't think it's too early to put that out there and what people might be working on.
So back to the other scenario, every publisher that we send a query to suddenly has a brain parasite, is not thinking straight, and they say no, and we run out of options to submit to. What happens then?
So we have no other options. The book is just not sold. Then we start talking about book number 2 and what we want to do. Your debut book is a hard book to sell. You have no numbers behind you. You have to prove that there's definitely an audience there, against all doubt. So it can be a hard book. So we'll look at what we think went wrong, what we think we can change, and kind of use that to shape our approach for book number 2. And, keep in mind, it's a very subjective industry. There are so many amazing books that don't find homes. Because if you think about it, how many imprints are there now? How many, books are on a list? That doesn't leave a lot of room. And editors only can pick what they love. And it's just a taste thing. I mean, there's a lot of times books just don't sell. And I always say to authors, imagine going to a bookstore and you can only pick 5 books. That's going to be so different for so many different people. And the books you're leaving behind on the bookshelf aren't necessarily bad. So that there's a little bit of that, just keeping in mind the subjectivity of the industry. But I think also a grain of what can we do better to, bring up our game and really make sure book number 2 finds a home.
At that point, are you just kind of culling through the rejections you receive, trying to find commonalities between those rejections?
If there are, I think you can drive yourself crazy trying to please everyone. No one book will please everyone, so you shouldn't try. And like I said, there is
Banneker Bones and the Giant Robot Bees.
Right, except for yours, which is perfect. So I think there is a level of balancing that, realizing you can't please everyone, but also realizing these are industry professionals and, their opinion means something. But I do think it's a balance.
And so, okay. We're back to the drawing board. At that point, do you want to be a little bit more involved with what I'm going to be working on? Or is it still going to be just like if we had sold the book, same process for getting ready for the next book?
Probably about the same. I'm pretty involved with my clients at this point. So I'd want to be involved, ideally with the idea, hear what it is. So I would say, I'd say equal involvement, pretty hands-on there still.
Cool. And then coming up toward book launch, aside from going on fantastic podcast and talking about the pending launching of your clients' books, how involved are you in preparing the book not preparing the book, but preparing me for launch? Are you using your skills as a former book publicist, current marketer, to help me figure out how to position myself and the book to succeed?
I think I more use my skill. Publicity is shifting so much, and what sort of outlets are popular, what outlets exist anymore are shifting. So I'm not really here to be your publicist, but I am here to give you tools to be your best advocate. Because I think, all authors, you have to be your best advocate. And I think I prepare authors for that and what publicity could look like. I think for some authors, you get a huge tour, a huge plan, a huge budget, and that's great. But for a lot of authors, that's just not the case, even if you signed at a big 5 house. And I think the best thing you can do for publicity, I always used to say as a publicist, is when authors help me help you. And so I really encourage authors to take that into their own hand and, set up book events. If you're a children's author, set up school events, set up library events, and, loop your publicist in. Always ask them, like, what is the best way that they like for you to handle these things. But I think as an author, especially now with bookshelf space shrinking, you have to be your own advocate and look at that not as a negative, but just as a positive, and see yourself as a team with the publisher in a different way. So I think what I really do, knowing that and having been on that other side, is prepare them for that and make sure they have the tools in that regard, rather than being their actual publicist and maybe pitching their books to, various outlets.
Well, with the experience you have in book marketing, what are some things you wish every author was doing, just base level, get ready with at least these things to promote your book?
As a publicist, I always say having a website is just so helpful. And, it doesn't have to be fancy, but just a way that people can contact you or find out who your agent is. So just have, your name, an email address. I always tell my clients they can list my email address, just the baseline, so that they can get in touch. And I think that is a really useful tool. Nonfiction is going to be so different with your platform. As a fiction writer, do you need a platform on social media? No. I've had authors that have really strong platforms. I have some that have none. Do I think it can be useful? To some extent. I think it's a great way to connect with, readers and writers. Does it move the needle on sales? I think that's always tough to judge, but I think it can be a useful tool regardless.